Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest IFT British section webinar. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes, just to let people the time to come in. Rihanna has opened the door. I can see people coming in. Welcome, everyone. While we waiting a couple of minutes to start, feel free to add in a chat your name and where you're joining us from. That'd be a nice thing to do. So if you can put in the chat where you're calling us from. We're going to start in a few minutes. Just seeing the numbers coming up. Thank you, Gunnar. You first want to put it up there. Thank you, Andreas. Colin. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start in a few seconds. In the meantime, if you don't mind putting in the chat your name and where you're calling us from, or where you're currently sitting, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Just a few, just 30 seconds or so before we get going. Welcome, everyone. As I just said, please add your name and where you're sitting at the moment in the chat. That would be lovely. And I will make the official start in a second. Right, I think we're just 3 minutes in, so I propose that we make a start. So official start now. Welcome everybody to our latest IFT British section webinar. And today we'll be talking about consumer behaviors and factors affecting brand desirability. For this webinar, we've arranged for 3 great speakers to join us, and the format will be that each of them will give us a presentation for 12 to 13 minutes or so, and then we will have the remaining 15 minutes or so for the Q&A session. So what we're proposing that you do is that you put the questions that spring into your mind in the Q&A box, and then we will manage that afterwards during the Q&A session. So put your question in the Q&A section. In the chat, you can say who you are and where you're calling us from, or where you're sitting at the moment. So that'd be lovely to see. And I can see we've got a nice cross-section of people from around the world here, which is lovely to see. Right, so we have quite a busy program, so I suggest we start now. And so we will have Edward, Constantinos, and then finish with Sara. So we start with Edward Bergen, who is a principal analyst at FutureBridge and a specialist in megatrends and how they are driving change, innovation, and development in the food and drink industry, and the impact on consumer attitudes, expectations, taste, and buying decisions. That's quite a long one there. But Edward, welcome. If you can share your screen, and then we can get started with your first presentation, and then we have Constantinos and then Sara.
So give me the A-OK that you can see a nice, pretty looking screen, I'm hoping.
Yes, we can see the 7 forces. So off you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this one, and it is an honor to be on it. I have a very short time, and I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of the big pulls and pushes that we're seeing in the food and nutrition industry. We've already had an introduction, so I'm Ed. You can call me Ed from now on. That's all good. I always like the Edward first, but we'll get going. So for those that don't know FutureBridge, I'm going to do a 10-second. We're a techno-commercial consulting advisory firm looking at how we can help our customers innovate, but thinking about that 1 to 25-year perspective. So we spend a lot of time marrying the consumer need with getting it done. So how they can actually implement new technologies, new innovations, and of course, doing that across the world. So that's the quick intro on Future Bridge. Now, because and I already told the group just before we started this presentation, I'm a bit of a geek, so we've got to start with a little magical quote. But this idea that isn't 7 the most powerfully magical number? Actually, that's just how our sort of big industry macro forces were built when we designed them. And none of these will be a surprise when you look through some of those areas that I'm going to take you through in the next 10 minutes or so. So pulls around moving from physical to mental well-being and into sort of holistic well-being and long-term health with wellness-centric lifestyle. We've got those challenges around ethical and social and how consumers are thinking more about the reasons why they might buy a product, whether it be for the planet or for an activist decision that they may have. We've got areas around, is it technology first that decides consumer behavior? Or is it consumer behavior that decides what technologies we'll see? But with automation being what it is, the growth of AI, personalization, and the speed in which we can make things, the idea of radical automation. And then, of course, uncertainty, which is probably the biggest driver of innovation right now when we look at what we've been seeing from trends over the past few years. So we're going to look at them. And I'm going to take you through each of these macros, talk about the macros, and hopefully kick us off nicely for some discussion later. So emotive personalization, what is this? It's how brands are getting more specific, more targeted. It's not enough just to go after a group of people based on their demographic. We really are getting to know the consumer more than ever before. And when we look at what businesses are doing, so before we even get into consumers, it's a priority for business leaders. Being personalized in their offerings is a key priority for major businesses. And they're actually seeing up to a sort of a triple ROI by personalizing their services. And when we look at consumers, that's what they want. That's what they're asking for. More than half, they want to see personalized recommendations, and they're expecting it to happen. The big problem is that the data at the moment around personalization is pretty fragmented, depending on how much you share, and it can get quite overwhelming as well for the consumer. It's almost like your phone is listening to you and then it offers you products and services 5 minutes later that aren't quite exactly what you're looking for because you spent 3 seconds on an ad. So there's still a hell of a lot of challenges around this sort of these groups of innovations. AI, it's being explored, but there's a lot of worries about AI being used in our innovation. So brands and consumers are still concerned about what it may bring. What we then did, though, was we blew up emotive personalization into all those little technologies that we're seeing being explored. Now, Future Bridge, while we love consumer intelligence to understand, what do they want, we're specialists at trying to understand what are happening in the early stages of innovation, whether it be patents, whether it be scientific literature, announcements, little bits of investment here and there, and moving into startups. So we try to understand, well, what are those papers saying? What are those investments and announcements saying? And we got a whole host of innovations linked to emotive personalization, whether it be consumers wanting to target their very specific mood challenges, whether it be the ability to print the foods that you want in the shape that you want it with the nutrition that you want. And the list goes on. I'm going to talk about a couple of companies each time we look at these macro forces. You may have heard of Nourished. They've been around a while, but they're pretty interesting because they've recently partnered up with a 3D printing service with Elo Smart Nutrition, and now they can print your sweetie nutrition supplements with 389 million combinations. It's incredible the specificity they can bring. Then you've got brands like Future Health who are going to help really understand those needs that maybe that Nourish know about and start developing meal plans for the consumer at a really minute level and really understanding that nutrition. What's next? It's eco-transparency. The big story this year in eco-transparency has been around reporting. We've been talking about this the last couple of years, where I met Bertrand. I remember it being at a Food Matters Live event, and he and I were talking about, how brands are going to have to report on everything they do when it comes to sustainability in much more detail than ever before. And that was a key factor that companies were talking. So is this a consumer need? Well, consumers are influenced by it. They say that they care, but actually, does it matter? Because the companies are going to have to start, celebrating sustainability on their packs anyway. Now, the challenges around that, consumer stigma around, do they really understand sustainability? Do they care about these claims? Do they trust the brands? Are brands greenwashing? And at the same time, we're seeing lots of opportunity for those technologies to help brands track their entire processes, track what their suppliers are doing to manufacture. So what does that look like on the ground? We're seeing from field to fork amazing innovations, everywhere from sourcing really locally and then informing the end manufacturer where that product has come from so they can tell great stories. Of course, we know about blockchain technology, traceability. We know about edible packaging, which is going to help the consumer connect with that supply chain. At the same time, though, you've got some amazing examples as well. Some patents that we've been looking at. So if you look at the top one, this fungal biomass, this is particularly interesting from a sustainability point of view. It's a waste valorization example, brand called Find, using brewers' spent grain to create new alternative proteins. So all these new innovations that we're seeing to become more sustainable and creating those for consumers and then celebrating the nutrition of them as well. What's next? It's wellness-centric lifestyle. So the shift from physical to mental to holistic health, and how consumers are getting much more specific about what matters to them when it comes to their health. So we know consumers seeing food as medicine, 61% of consumers saying that they consume functional foods for mental health support. And we know that that's got more specific, whether it be 40% for sleep, as an example. I have a 2-year-old, I never get any sleep. And at the moment, she only wants me at night. My wife is getting off at the moment at nighttime, which is great for her. And at the same time, if we look at some of these other innovations that we're seeing, so we know about GLP-1 as an innovation around consumers taking medication like Ozempic, but also pairing those users with food products. And we've got as much in the United States as 12% having GLP-1 medication in 2024. Those numbers are insane when you think about how quickly this trend has come along. And therefore, we're going to see those communications on pack, and we're going to see formulations talking about it. Now, the challenge, again, is just around being able to really target those needs, maybe getting lost in just the flooding of innovation for consumers. And then, of course, they're very expensive because they're playing in maybe smaller spaces than they ever did before than just maybe fiber and protein. So often brands struggle to get a facing and visibility on shelf and online, and then they lose their market share. For the big brands, are they moving as fast as the startups to sort of develop products in this space? Now, what are we seeing? I mentioned already, it's specificity. So you're seeing a lot more innovations around very particular claims, and you're seeing a lot of life stage nutrition, or at least a marketing towards life stage nutrition. Just this example from Nestlé Health Science, they've had a product like Boost for a really long time. It's been around for forever, from as long as I can remember. But now they're starting to make those claims on packs and help it make it easier for consumers who are also maybe on that medication to service them. And what I love is how those health brands out there with this brand G Fuel, who are targeting very particular occasions with health products. This is G Fuel. They're using Cognizin, and they're talking about how it targets brain function and focus with their formulation for gamers. And we know that gaming industry is a booming one. Into radical automation, essentially speed of innovations, and also taking out a lot of the human laborers to develop really efficient manufacturing and sort of chains. Now, the first thing is artificial intelligence, and we're seeing it being used everywhere, all the way from in agriculture to help plan what my yields are going to be and where I should be farming, all the way through to product innovation to maybe understand consumer behavior, much quicker and reduce a 2-year life cycle to a 6-month for a new product launch. So we know that we're going to see a lot more involvement of AI and of sort of swift technology to help brands develop products faster. Now, what are some of the opportunities? What I love here is the partnerships. We're seeing a lot of software and technology companies partnering up across industry and therefore taking out that stress of, well, how do I do it? And that's what's making this industry quite exciting. The challenge is we're a traditional workforce, and the impact that's going to have on consumers being retrained, not knowing what their roles and their jobs are going to be. And then, of course, just the explosion of competition as well that we're seeing in the industry. What does this look like in practice? I love this example from Profile Print. So they're using, it's a way to actually analyze ingredients, like especially commodity ingredients like coffee, my favorite, or tea or cocoa, and to understand things like the quality of the ingredient while you are farming it, or when you farm it. So you know, should I continue to farm this? Does this meet the quality that I expect or not? And that's what Profile Print does as a really great example. We're seeing similar examples in areas of packing, such as from SIG, who are boosting output of their product. Into activist consumerism. This is all about how consumers are trying to understand the world around them and really picking brands based on maybe their footprint from a climate change point of view, or the political decisions those brands make. What does this look like in practice? Well, we've got examples of where consumers are saying that they would stop working with companies because of those companies' ethics, or if they treated their staff badly. And then also the story of local versus global as well. A big contingent of consumers caring about all of these. Now, of course, the opportunities are in celebrating those stories and creating, amazing new products, but mostly with the telling the consumer about, well, what you're doing for the environment or for your workers. At the same time, though, there's a lot of consumer scrutiny. And again, it's the cost involved in doing this. Well, should there be a cost? Of course, it's so important, but it takes a long time for brands and companies to innovate in this direction. What have we seen from this sort of activist consumerism? What I've loved, and this most recent one, is from Meatly. They actually finally launched in the UK cultivated pet food. They did that with Pets at Home, if anyone has a dog, on the call. And we're already seeing cultivated meat appearing in our innovation. I know I haven't got too long left, so I'm going to keep going. I've got maybe a minute and a half to go, but that's fine. Our next macro force is on social cultural fusion. How can you really interact with consumers and understand them and their loves and likes from a food point of view? And understand their cultures and their backgrounds, and how can you fuse them together? Consumers are foodies, especially young consumers, and they may not have money to spend on houses, but they will spend their money on food and experiences with their friends. That trend hasn't changed the last few years. So, of course, there's lots of opportunities to innovate around fusion and new experiences, and also digital experiences to bring the culture to the consumer. But authenticity is always going to be an issue. So what's that look like on the ground? I love this example from Kraft Heinz. So they did this flavor tour range over the course of this year, where they really looked at different street food markets and how they could bring those flavors to life. And then Coke did this Sprite Chill range, and it's all about how they used sport to also bring that brand to life. They used house music to do it, and they worked with black DJs in the United States to really target those consumer groups. It's a pretty exciting campaign. And then it's uncertainty. Now, right now, consumers are really worried. They haven't got much money to spend, and that has impacted innovation. And we know that inflation is a big worry for them, and it's relaxing a little bit, but it's very much still there. What does that look like? Well, it means that consumers are looking for value, they're savvy, and they will make decisions where they'd rather not buy innovation and take those risks. How are brands reacting to that, though? What I love was this story from Tesco recently, where they've actually taken off their reduced range and they're trialing a yellow sticker for £0, actually giving food away to those consumers that need it. And I love that story that we're seeing to really help consumers and giving back, and whether we'll start to see more of that across the world. I will share this deck with you. So for those that want to see a full range of our microforces, you can have a look at it later. But I wanted to finish by saying, well, what did this mean from the trends that we're seeing in 2025? So again, what we did was we analyzed impact, market analysis, sales data. And then we also looked at what are we seeing in early stages of innovation? And it came up with 4 trends for us. And I'll speed through to my final slide if it comes. Oh, I've gone too far. So we consolidated all of those micro forces, looked at the marriages between them, and we came up with 4 trends. One is on eating my emotions. It's all about mood enhancing foods. The next is on life stage nutrition and the untapped opportunity to target consumer age groups better. Another is on valorizing the unusable and waste valorization. And finally, it's all about AI. So these are my kind of 4 final thoughts for the future of our food industry. And if you want a code, and you can sign this off later, you can download our 2025 report. Thank you very much. And over to you, Bertrand.
Thank you very much, Ed, for this whirlwind tour of mega trends. Fascinating. And yeah, so I'm just digesting it all still. So thank you very much, Ed. We're just going to go straight into Dr. Constantinos Pantidos from Brand AVIATORS, and who's a specialist in how biology and neuroscience shape consumer behaviors and brand desirability. So Constantinos, over to you. And remember, everyone, to put your questions in the Q&A sessions, that we will come to that after the 3 presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bertrand, and thank you everyone for connecting today. We are going to discuss in the next 10 minutes or so about emotions and how we can make emotions work in practice, because we know that emotions are very important for any decision making. It's a large part of purchasing decisions, and we know through many different types of disciplines today that emotions actually play a larger role than what we had expected in the past. We don't need to talk a lot about this. Everyone knows how important emotions are. But in practice, as managers, we spend too much time on rationalizing about decisions. So talking about claims, USPs, recipes of products, and commercial subjects, like how many display stands we put in the supermarkets, etc., which of course are important. But I think in this way we are missing the point. We are missing the point because the largest part of any decision, as we said before, is unconscious. So why is this happening? Because as we know, emotions are abstract, evasive. We cannot capture them and put in products, in recipes, meaning messaging and communication, packaging, etc. Let alone combining or aligning all these touch points so that the brand is consistent. Because as we are going to see, consistency is very important for the brain, so that it classifies the brand and understands what exactly the consumer buys. So emotions are used, of course, they are useful. They are used by the brain to screen out noise. They are useful because nature created emotions to help us take very quick decisions. And over time, of course, the needs of the human race changed, but still we need these emotions, of course, to take the decisions, including purchasing decisions. So we can say that the desirability of the brand is based on the brain's ability to recognize patterns. So when all the different touch points are aligned, the brain understands the job that it has done behind in aligning all these elements, not just the communication or the product, but also the social media messages and everything. First of all, by the brain categorizing itself is rewarding. So because it understands the brand, it likes this. And this is already important when we are, for instance, before of a supermarket rack or shelf or a screen where we buy things. So this is a very important slide because it shows that unless the brand is very consistent, the brand cannot be classified, let's say, by the brain. And this is where the brain starts disengaged, becoming disengaged and starting comparing pricing and how many grams, size, colors, etc. Because these are more rational data. We can compare pricing, we can compare the sizes of the products or any rational aspect, as we said, because we don't control the unconscious. We don't understand how it works, not only for managers, but also it's the same for the consumers. But if a brand is focused on one type of emotion or emotive, as we call them in our company, then the brain automatically authenticates the brand. It says in very simple words, these guys are telling me the truth because all the elements point to the same direction. So the quality inside must be good. And all this happens, you remember, in nanoseconds when we take a decision. And this is how the brain automates everything. The brain automates every decision because it's not lazy, but it wants to save energy. The brain takes up 25 to 30% of all calories we put in our organism. So it's a very expensive, let's say, muscle of the body. So the brain automates the decisions that are not so important. And of course, the decision to buy one brand instead of another at the supermarket is not so important for people who have to admit this. And this is how routines are created. Routines are created through this need for the brain to automate. But as we said again, how can we align everything so that the brand goes to one direction? So we have worked for many years, 11 years actually, to put together many different disciplines, and we came up with this tool. So it's very busy, but this is the brain, let's say, in a very simplified way. There are these 12 motives, and all emotions around humans come from these 12 motives. So the motives start by their biological root. They were useful. That's why they created, they have a locus, a place in our brain. The brain was developed by nature to drive behavior. So biology is important to understand the value, first of all these motives, and then to trigger them, we need neuroscience. So through neural activity, the emotions are, let's say, produced, and the emotions then penetrate our everyday life. That's why in the outer circle, we see some examples of global, of universal, let's say, values like independence for the motive to seek. We have diversity, dependence, agility. These are things we talk a lot nowadays in the organizations, but we see it's not something new. So the brain, the human brain has been developed because of these kind of 12 motives. And the motive to play, for instance, make us humans because we were able to test things in safe situation, in a safe situation. The motive to seek help us find partners, food, of course, and this gives us excitement. And that's why we're triggered by knowing the unknown, what we cannot see. The motive to transform help us change. People, we don't like change because we want the comfort zone, which is this motive to feel safe. But we need to change because the environment changes. So the brain has mechanisms for changing, like shifting systems, we call them mutation systems, etc. We have the motive to defy that goes against. This help us, of course, to go against threats, but also to build our own margin and live. We need to be creative because personality arises in this kind of way. So individuality becomes important. And we understand, as you probably know, that we are individuals after the 7th year of age. Up to that year, we believe in some way that we are part of our mother. We have the motive to grow, which is development. ambition, etc. We have the motive to control. These are more recent systems, let's say, the motive to control, the motive to transform, and the motive to balance, especially, because they are what we call the neocortex, very complex systems that help us govern our life, while the more animalistic motives, like the motive to seek or the motive to feel safe or the motive to play, are older. It took something like 500 million years for every motive in the brain to be developed. So we are wired to these things, and we cannot go against these motives. We have to align the branch. It's easier to align the branch and the products with these motives. The question is how we do so. So I'm going to give you a methodology we use in our company, which instead of asking consumers, at least in the first place, when we design the strategy, then we ask, of course, consumers to validate our strategy. But before that, because consumers cannot articulate these deep biological elements, we start by the facts in the brain. So we analyze the brand using biosemiotics, so it's semiotics informed by biology, let's say, all these tools that we have seen before. Then we align the product, or we study the product if it's already there, and we want to understand what is this brand about. The product is part of the brand, of course. And I have here the lemon example because it's easy to show, but this is a kind of new science that puts together the sensory science and psychology, or evolutionary psychology. So lemon is the perfect playful food or fruit. We have seen before the motive to play is one of the 12 motives. The yellow color characterizes this kind of motive. There is a citric acid inside, which for the brain is sharpness, invigoration. We know D-limonene, for instance, gives us an uplift, but also it energizes saliva, it opens up the appetite. Let's say lemon is acid. There is high concentration of protons, so the brain thinks this is something teasing. The color is bright, of course, and yellow, and it's juicy, and it's highly volatile, which means also for the brain a kind of superficiality, let's say, or spontaneity, let's say, in a better way. All of these, you see, they go to the same direction, because we can say this is not by chance. Humans created the lemon as it is today, because of course we had citruses, etc., but not lemons as such. So as we breed, let's say, the races of pets, by choosing which pet we like, and the other pets, because they are not like us, or they are a bit different, we don't like for some reason, then we breed fruits, we breed everything, food also, around the world. And then we start with the packaging, of course, the colors. Colors are also biological elements. You probably know the brain does not see the colors. There are no colors, actually. It is the way the light goes into the surfaces of things that colors are created and perceived by the brain. So also the straight line instead of a curve, the words, everything, nothing is without meaning, let's say, for the brain. Right now there is a chaos in marketing, because we have the agencies, we have marketing people, the owners, the top managers, etc., that have their own views of what they like and what they dislike. And this kind of tool we propose puts some kind of order. Of course, it's not perfect. We don't claim that we know perfectly the brain, but it puts some type of order. And the good news is that it works every time. We work with many companies around the world, big companies like Mondelez, Nestlé, etc. But I'm not here to advertise myself. It's just to show you that the tool works. And I'm going to also now discuss about not just for branding, because of course, obviously, this helps us to analyze the brand and the positioning, because this is the central element around which we align all the different touch points. Like products, we consider the product is a touch point for the consumer, and very, very important part of the experience, as it is probably the website, the packaging itself, that sometimes is the same as product. But we can use this kind of tools to create mood food. So we have created for the first time a series of sauces that have moods inside. And the moods are triggered by the colors, but the color of the product itself, the packaging, the concept, of course, and the texture. We work with ingredient to analyze textures because textures also have an impact on the brain, on the flavor, etc., let alone the conditioning of all these things before even we try the product, condition our brain. We created the first neuropackaging with Owens Illinois, the largest glass packaging in the world. In this way, we can use innovation to scan the markets and discover things that are, let's say, white space opportunities that are invisible to others, because all the competitors focus on the USPs we discuss, and we try to see what product we can bring now in the market, what is the trend, as Edward very well explained. But behind this is something that is not changing even in 100 years or 500 years, etc. All of this now come with a personality test that or mood test that we can help marketing, of course, to sell the product. And this is the idea of the sauces that also we presented in IFT last year in Chicago, in Seattle, in Paris, etc. Last thing, applications. First of all, the monosemantic strategy for the brand, so that the brand knows itself, the DNA, the essence. And then we align all the flavors, textures, etc. We can produce new products. This sauces category didn't exist before at all, not just the products or the SKUs, the category didn't exist like this. And of course, enhance already important tools that the big companies have. We work with models, with ingredient, or in Illinois to analyze, to upgrade their tools. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Constantinos, for introducing you to this fascinating area. We're just going to move on quickly to Sara. So Sara is Client Success Team Sensory Advisor at Compusense, a global specialist firm in sensory and consumer testing. And remember to put your questions in the Q&A sessions. Thank you again, Constantinos, and off you go, Sara. Thank you.
Great. You can see my screen?
Yes. Oh, good.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this discussion. As mentioned, my name is Sara and I work for Compusense. Today, I'll be continuing our discussion through the lens of sensory and consumer science and the role that it plays through the product lifestyle to enhance brand desirability and improve brand loyalty. At Compusense, we talk a lot about how marketing is what brings a client in as product consumer, but it is the work of the sensory science that keeps them coming back. Here's just a brief overview of my talk, but let's jump right in. So for those of you that may not be familiar, sensory science is a scientific discipline used to evoke, measure, analyze, and interpret reactions to those characteristics of food and materials as they are perceived by the senses of sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. In my talk today, I will be approaching the role of sensory and consumer science in brand desirability from two sides. First, from the existing products in a brand's product line, and then for the new products that are yet to be developed. For your existing product line, sensory and consumer science can add value in the obtaining of an analytical analysis, in your product consistency, in your upscaling process, and in improvements. First and foremost, sensory and consumer science employs scientific methods aimed at limiting bias. You are able to obtain an understanding of your actual products by gaining information about flavor, aroma, texture, about packaging, that initial interaction, and how it maintains your product throughout its entire shelf life. You can learn more about your consumer usage and the portions that would be most beneficial to their uses. So are they using bulk amounts of your product, or Is it something that they need more on the go, and individual packaging would be more beneficial to them? Sensory and consumer science provides statistically backed data, which can then be used for decision making, which mitigates what is ultimately a business risk for the many decisions that are made throughout a product's life. Product consistency is very important in your brand, as you want your consumer to be able to expect what it is they are consuming or purchasing again and again. So this occurs in the day-to-day production, whether that is within a singular plant or across various locations. The quality control is very important. It could be in the fact of reformulation. So you might need to be changing your ingredients. For example, I spoke to a producer recently, and due to legislation change, one of their main ingredients is going to be no longer permitted by the federal government. So they are looking at reformulating and maintaining that consistent product that their consumers have grown to expect. And of course, with packaging, which ultimately leads into the freshness throughout its shelf life. So things are going well and you're ready to upscale. Maybe that means expanding internationally. Some key things to consider are regional preferences. Will what does well in your home market be well received in the new market, or are there changes required due to regional preferences or availability of various ingredients, all the while maintaining your brand and product consistency. Or maybe you're upscaling productions at home. This could mean potential changes in supplier, as your original supplier may not be able to keep up with your upscaled production. So changing suppliers or adding suppliers while maintaining your product consistency. Or maybe you're changing production methods to assist in that upscaled, that increased demand, all the while consistency being key. And then looking at improvements to your existing product line. You always want to go to your consumer and understand what their consumer preferences are, determine the areas for improvement, and then ultimately investigate the risk of making those changes. While your product might have room for improvement, your loyal consumers to your brand may enjoy your product, and making any changes could lead to a decrease in consumer satisfaction. On the other side of things, maybe you are newly starting out, or you're an existing brand and you want to add new products to your product line. Sensory consumer science can help in determining your market landscape in the research and development phase, your consumer testing, and to inform your marketing decisions. Here's an example of a product map that can be created through sensory data collection. It's an example of a study performed by some colleagues of mine who were looking at 16 whole grain breads and evaluated based on 55 sensory attributes. From the data, they were able to create this generalized Procrustes analysis, or GPA, that you see here. While they are all whole grain breads, we can see that their sensory properties can group them even further. This can be helpful in new product development in a few ways. One, you can look for areas of unmet needs in the market, or you can compare it to consumer preferences to determine key demographics of each type of subcategory of your product. Or finally, to determine who your true competitors are in the space. While these are all whole grain breads, maybe your direct competitor is not who you assume it would be. And should you want to move forward with your prototype, comparing it to a competitor in a head-to-head preference test, you are able to then, in fact, compare it to the appropriate competitor. In research and development, again, it's very important to understand the sensory properties of your product and seek consumer insights, which may lead to reformulation as needed. As an example, I recently worked with a client who had 5 different prototypes, and they were determining what should be taken to market. In discussion with the client, their research and development team, they had a clear winner of their line of prototypes, but when we took it and tested it with actual consumers, it was the poorest performing prototype. So they were then able to take it back, reformulate, adjust based on the consumer feedback, and come back to the consumers with their newly reformulated prototype, which then did much better. Using your consumers throughout the process then ultimately mediates risk by providing real consumer feedback before going to market. So when we're talking to our consumers, we have a number of important items that we can obtain from them. This is not an exhaustive list, but here are some examples. We look at consumer habits, at their wants, their needs, their preference in a variety of things, not only in taste, but maybe in purchase location, packaging, quantity sold, their purchase intent. So we can gauge their purchase intent after testing real products, which is a step beyond the concept testing that may be performed in an initial study, as well as the perceptions of your product, the interaction with the product, how they're using it. So are they using your product as you are intending them to, or as you had originally planned for them to use it, or are they using it in a new case? Is it, are they consuming it in its whole state, or are they using it in ingredient in a different recipe? So understanding how the consumer uses it is an important factor in any of the decisions that are made down the line as far as ingredient substitution or shelf life or packaging portion size. And finally, it can inform your marketing decisions. So again, we want to determine defining characteristics so that we can then market those that are important to your product as well as to your consumer. Focus on your target demographic. So are the people who enjoy your product actually your demographic group that you had initially is selected as your target demographic? And finally, in ad claims. There can be legal implications with ad claims, and a strong scientific method and data to back your claims is vital. So what are our main takeaways? Sensory and consumer science provides valuable information at all stages of a product life cycle, and consistent products build client trust and brand loyalty. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I see Bertrand here, so we're ready for our Q&A, but if anyone would like to reach out by email afterwards, I would be happy to continue the discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Right. Thank you so much, Constantinos. If you can come online as well. So we all, the panel assembled. Wow, that was a whirlwind of information and different angles all around that brand desirability, all the factors that might affect that and how to optimize that. So thank you so much to those 3 panelists coming from Greece, Ontario, and the UK. So an international group of speakers here. Right, let's have a look at the questions that we've had. I can see there's one in the Q&A here. It is often said and perceived that marketing is all-powerful within companies. How do the speakers see these latest tools and approaches will affect the power balance between technical and marketing functions in companies? Does that make sense? Have you read it? It's in the Q&A session if you need to read it yourselves. But it's all about the power play between marketing and technical, and whether all the things we've discussed will have an impact on that power balance here. Anyone?
Yeah, if I can say something
Yeah.
about this, is that it's already affecting marketing and in a high speed. So we have to embrace, I think, all these tools and use the power of the tools to create powerful ideas for people. We cannot go against them, but we have to be careful of how we use these tools, because if we just ask AI some specific questions, normally it gives us some generic questions, some generic answers. So we have to train AI according to the scientific elements we have for our products or services or marketing in general. I don't think that is going to replace people, because people will always need to fine-tune the results of AI, because AI and all these tools are, let's say, linguistic tools. They are not cognitive tools. So the brain works in a cognitive way. Of course, over the years it will become closer and closer, but unless they become cognitive tools, they will always need, let's say, guidance and direction on the answers.
Anybody wants to build on Constantinos' points?
I'll give a couple of examples that we've been seeing. So I mentioned one of our trends is on AI. I wonder if I can actually drop a screenshot into the chat, but I'll try to after I speak. Couple of very interesting early innovations. So I'm just looking at another screen. So there's a brand called Affectiva, AFFECTIVA, if anyone's seen them. And this is, for me, absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying because they use camera equipment to understand human expression. So they right now would know if I'm hungry, and probably might know maybe what type of hunger I might want a drink. Maybe it's hunger and stress, because they're able to see micro movements and body language. Now, at what stage does this become massive power for marketers? Now, if you think about Gen Zs, they're quite willing to share their data, and if they're sharing their data on their phones, and they're willing to be part of the next generation of social media that use Affectiva's technology, then what does it mean for companies? So the positive side is companies can become amazingly empathetic when in how a consumer is feeling, even in store with a camera in the consumer's face, and they're getting little prompts of, this guy is having a really bad day, maybe talk to him like this. And at the other side, it might be that we're going to start to see marketing before we even say what we might like or don't like. So look up Affectiva, they're pretty interesting, and there's a bunch of other ones as well, but that's the one that I'm thinking of.
Thank you, Edward. Any other points? Jump on that? No? Okay, let's go to another question here in the Q&A. How can brands stay true to their identity while adapting their messaging to connect with people from different cultures? Ooh.
This is a nice one.
Yeah.
I like this question because it always comes up. And if we go very deep into the brand essence, and we base this essence on biology, then the brand is global. It's universal. It talks to every human being, let's say. But how we adapt this into a particular culture or country, it could be different. So I would say the core, the essence of the brand, like Pampers is about care, or Harley Davidson is a defined brand. This does not change. But if we go to sell, Harley Davidson in different countries, we have to take into consideration tactical, let's say, tactical executional elements. This is the difference. If the brand doesn't know their own character, their DNA, then it has to adapt to the different countries, and there is no actually a brand like this, because people travel, we go into the website of the brand, So we cannot have a different DNA